Yep.
Let's do it again. Hey, everyone. Let's do the intro.
Are we good? We sure we don't want to go for another take
Let's
there?
do it. Let's do another round. No, okay. How's
That's a
everyone
double intro.
doing? Welcome to another episode of The New Left. We got a couple topics that we're going to talk about in a little bit of depth. But first of all, how's everyone doing today? Everyone doing all right? Happy hump day. Happy Wednesday. Welcome, Alex. We do have a special guest with us. So how about Alex? Why don't you just quickly introduce yourself to everybody, tell them what you're all about, and then we'll get started.
Sure. I'm a writer, independent journalist, historian, and activist out of North Florida, and heavily involved in the anti-imperialist cause, well-traveled in Latin America. Late last year, I was a regional election observer in Venezuela and traveled to many different parts of the country. So I've written extensively about imperialism, both internally in the United States and externally, its external arm, how it operates in the third world and the global South, especially in Latin America.
Right on. And I think, we were saying we'll definitely have to get you on again when we're talking about foreign policy like issues. It just so happened that this week we got really into some of the domestic things that are happening. And, I think with reason, there's a lot that's been going on when it comes to Amazon unionizing in Staten Island and the effects that I think it's having on the labor movement. And then we just found out some updates on student debt, right? Nowhere near what it should be. But there is some progress in terms of, I guess, pushing that back. So I look forward to talking about that as well. But I think what really got us started with sort of this topic is I'm just going to share my screen because I think this is a real, especially I think just about all of us on here are either millennials or millennial adjacent. We're around that sort of, generation when it comes to our age and such. And this was something that Ludin, I think, brought up where it says, 52%, everyone can see this, right? No. Mm-hmm. Yes, you can. Perfect. 52% of young adults now live with their parents, the highest rate ever, surpassing even the Great Depression. The most educated and most in-depth generation in history did everything they were supposed to do and got this. So I think maybe, Ludin, I know you were the one who found this, and I think it's a very interesting statistic, and I think it speaks to a lot of experiences that many of us, experience. So just I want to hear a little bit about your reaction to this and your overall take and everything.
Well, yeah. So the moment I saw this, I was like, yeah, this is attacking me on a personal level because I'm one of those 52% of people that live with their parents. And I noticed that something was really off around the time I graduated high school because while most people, especially in TV, like went to college right out of high school, I noticed that myself, I couldn't go because my parents had issues affording it. So out of high school, I had to go to trade school, and then I tried to get into college through that, and it was the same issue. Like I would still, since I was still like under 24, I would still need to use my parents' income in order to apply, and boom. And that also translates to the job market because even trying to work to get into college, there were really no jobs that would pay enough for me to even like try. So I spent the last 5 years or so, actually, yeah, at that point I'd been working for 5 years, saving up money, and like there were no jobs that would hire me that would actually like pay the loans if I even attempted to get the loans. So at that point I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna wait until some point in the future and try to see if I can like use the government system to go through college. And it worked for the first 2 semesters, and then the virus happened. And
yeah, for sure. Anyone else want to kind of add on or tag on to what Ludin said? Yes, what's up, Kay?
Hey, I want to highlight this comment quickly because this kind of plays into my response where Regina describes, in my situation, we find it difficult to move away from each other due to financial reasons. It's easier to live with other people and split bills versus being biting an entire rent or mortgage solo. And that is becoming the norm now. Even if not everyone still lives with their parents, because there are some people out there who are like, oh, I don't live with my parents. They still like have roommates. They decide as friends, let's rent out this place 800. That's more manageable than one person paying almost $2,000, especially if you live near Toronto. I'm going to be in Toronto in like a week or something like that, how high the rent prices are. But you can usually tell how cultures tend to shift by what you have to do to impress a date. Bear with me for a moment. Like 25 years or so ago, if you went out with someone and they found out you didn't have your own place yet at like my age, or you didn't have an apartment to yourself or something like that, and be like, oh my God, he's like some freak like who lives in his basement and probably plays D&D. He's so sweaty. And then 25 years later, it's all like, oh my God, you have a whole basement all to yourself. You're so fucking lucky. And while I do find that out, because I've been on a couple dates and that usually like gets a good response. It's like, yes, I have some level of independence. But it is kind of sad because where's the escape? We have no escape, basically. We're trapped here. And it becomes even worse because the number one people who will like talk down to us leftists are all the fucking time. I hate that I even use the word here. It's boomers, right? The guys who are trying to be like, oh, just work harder, stop eating so much avocado toast, blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, a lot of our parents are boomers, and a lot of them do have this old-fashioned mindset, right? And a lot of my friends have parents like that, and it's kind of insufferable. And the fact that a lot of us, because of capitalism regressing so badly, are forced to live at home and put up with this kind of shit. And we're basically trapped in a prison, both in the working world and at home. So, it makes a lot of us miserable. It drives up suicide rates. I know it doesn't sound that bad because people who live with their parents are still living. But when a part of you is taken away, when your independence is stripped or locked behind basically a paywall, you don't feel like your life is going to go anywhere, despite what people around you keep saying, oh, just work harder and go to school and stuff like that.
Well, Comrade K, if I could add on to that, as a working class student at the grad school level, even though most of my grades are B plus or A, I still have to go in debt. Because a lot of times it's justified. It's like, well, when you're going for your bachelor's or you're going for your associate, as long as you get really good grades, a lot of times you can get scholarship. But also, mind you, gas prices, right? To drive to class, you can't just rely on the few grant scholarship money. You'll have to go into debt as well. But even, let's say I live down the street from my college. Once you're at the grad level, even getting good grades, I have to, in order to pay for all those courses I need to take, get into debt somewhat. So that continues on. And something else I wanted to mention on the show, why do they call it student loan forgiveness? I mean, really think about this, right? Since when is it a sin to get educated? I have to be forgiven? Like, that's why, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but that's why I prefer to call it cancellation. But, Chomsky's talked about this. Who are the vanguards of all the revolutions in history? Are the youth. What's the best way to pacify the youth? This is intentional by design. If you're worried about paying off a debt where you have a higher interest rate than to even get a car, then that's going to prevent you from going out and rebelling. Hence, in France, it's not that they're superior to Americans. They rebel more than us because they have their education covered and they have federal jobs guarantee, so they don't have to worry about retaliation. So they do these things by design to try to prevent us from rebelling and keep us in check through fear.
Absolutely. And so these are, I think, were really good anecdotes. And I always am someone who thinks it's always great to balance anecdotes with data so that it can further strengthen the anecdotes and make it less likely that you'll get gaslit by your story, right? When you actually can say. So this was actually something, I believe, Amira, you found this, correct?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So this is an interesting graph. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so, okay. There it is. All right. So top 0.1% earnings grew 15 times as fast as 90% earnings, right? So we look at this graph, and the top 1% from 1980, it was around the beginning of Reagan's time, you know, it skyrocketed all the way up to this amount. So the top 1% really increased their earnings from 1980 to 2015. The top 1% also did pretty well. And then the bottom 90% just sort of leveled out here, dipped. And so this is, I think, a great thing that really correlates to a lot what we're saying, because, if you're part of it is the debt, and part of it is that the jobs do not at all keep up with the amount of debt that you have, kind of similar to what Luden was saying, right? Where you couldn't really even get a good paying enough job to afford the tuition, which then makes it so that you have to go further into debt. And then the cycle repeats itself. So I think that's just a really good.
Andrew, I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Isn't the United States the only nation on earth that counts its unemployed only the few who are on unemployment benefits? Isn't that how they cover up what the actual unemployment figures are? Like, once you lose your unemployment benefits, according to the statistics, then you're employed. Or, if you weren't able to get on them and you still don't have work, you're technically employed, right? So the actual figures, the official figures that they show, isn't it only limited to people on unemployment benefits? I mean, anybody can answer that, but that's what I've gathered.
Yeah. Who else? Does anyone have anything that they would like to say to that?
Yeah, I can talk to that point, because that's been a really big issue that's being discussed right now, as the Biden administration is touting the very low unemployment numbers, because one of the factors that really is not being taken into account is that there are still millions of people that do not have jobs, that were formerly on unemployment, but they got kicked off in August, or it was like right near Labor Day of this last year, when the Biden administration decided to take away all of those unemployment protections that people had. And so that kicked off around 5 to 6 million people off of the unemployment rolls. So no, it doesn't mean that those 5 or 6 million people were able to obtain work. They are just no longer being identified within the unemployment.
Yeah, because I'm even talking pre-pandemic, Amira, because pre-pandemic, how they counted the unemployed were only people on unemployment benefits, and that was their way to cover up how many people were actually off work.
Yeah, and that is the same thing. So depending on what state you're in, you can qualify for unemployment, if from that same employer, usually like twice. So you can extend it once. But it really does depend on the state that you're in. And once you no longer qualify to retain that unemployment, whether or not you've been able to find a job, it's not that you get counted as having a job or being unemployed. You just kind of don't exist on those numbers anymore. And that's why when it came to the Great Recession in 2007 and going into 2009 and 10 and everything like that, when we saw the wages that really started to no longer grow at all, and unemployment was growing at that time, or underemployment. And that's another key factor we do not have enough information on here, and especially in the United States, is the underemployment, because a lot of these people, like millennials ourselves, that graduated in 2008 to 2011, a lot of us found very low paying jobs that did not equate to the education that we got. So whether it was a bachelor's, a master's, Juris Doctorate, PhD, things like that, we were not able to find jobs that paid enough to compensate you for what you need for all of the basic essentials. So there's a lot going into these unemployment numbers, both now and in the past. And the numbers that we have, especially today, that we're looking at, the reason why I push back a lot on people trying to say, oh, we have the lowest unemployment rate right now. I'm like, that's absolute bullshit, because 5 to 6 million people got kicked off that unemployment and now are no longer accounted for.
And most people, I mean, not most, but for the most, historically, like right now in the United States, there's more renters than ever. So I heard technically still the majority are homeowners. Well, they're owned by the bank. They're paying off mortgage. But now you have a lot of renters and the rent keeps going up. So a lot more people that were prior middle class are now working class or lower, having to pay rent, losing their homes. That's a major issue too, right?
Absolutely. And I think also we
also
talk.
speak to that one a little bit.
Yeah.
Because right now my parents actually own the building I live in, but with mortgage and oil, water, electricity, it just becomes a bit much to handle. So if you have a tenant who isn't, like, let's say around here the rent would be like normally around 3,000, maybe more, but if somebody can't pay at least like 2,000, like that becomes a problem, especially if it's like 3 floors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also, interesting and worth pointing out that after the 2007 or 2008, housing market crash, a lot of the homes that people lost, as we know, disproportionately, it was Black and brown communities that lost their homes. But many people across the board also lost their homes. And what happened to those homes? A lot of them got swallowed up by mega corporations that now own these homes. And of course, because these corporations have so much power in the renter market, there's little incentive for them to have affordable prices because they can just keep driving up the prices. And there's little incentive for them to actually take care of the apartment, right, and maintain it. So it all sort of intersects in some way. I know we're kind of getting a little bit away from student debt, and it's, I think, important that we somewhat stay on topic with it, but I think it's also important to show how it really is intersectional. It's almost impossible to just completely separate all these topics out because they do very much relate.
Well, look at disabled students, Andrew. That's related. I mean, Biden had passed a new law to make it easier where they didn't have to wait 3 years as an unemployed person after they graduate, to make it easier for disabled students to get cancellation. But I heard even that is not being implemented.
Mm-hmm.
So even the minimal that he's getting for severely disabled students is not being implemented properly.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring this tweet up real quick because for every, I feel like for every issue that so many, regular people, and I mean regular, I mean like people who, lower income to middle class, right? They can all relate to and agree on, the 90%. They can all agree that these are issues, right? And we can all relate. And I think we're even talking about our stories and can interrelate to a lot of the things how this causes us to live our lives, right? But of course, there's always a blue check person on Twitter that is doing very well, that likes to kind of almost gaslight you into saying it's not really an issue, it's just you, right? And so this is Matt Iglesias. I forget who he writes for, but he's like one of those like journalists that writes for big. Does anybody know exactly who he writes for or what who he works for? Okay.
Lamestream media.
It's somewhere in mainstream media. We can look it up later. You all can look it up and put it in the comments. Doesn't really matter. It's all the same. But he says, cannot stress enough that the median American has $0 in outstanding student loan debt. If you limit the analysis to people under 30, it's still zero, right? He then goes on to say that, trying to make an argument that we should not cancel student debt because of that information, right? And he says, if you want a policy take, here's one. In the fall of 2020, I thought Biden was likely to find himself presiding over a depressed economy in need of more stimulus than Congress would appropriate. Student debt cancellation under those circumstances would boost the economy. Since that time, the economic situation has changed. 2 stimulus bills, low unemployment, high inflation, and I changed my mind. Now yell at me if you want, right? And then
Okay.
So all right, so okay, because I know it was like, what sort of facts and figures do you have to counter what Iglesias says?
Oh, I'm not going to bring up any specific stats here, but I just want to point out that this thread is coming off rather rude. Right?
Of course.
And not just in a particular sense where he's talking down to people. It's the fact that we're talking about a policy that is labeled as student loan forgiveness. And in the mindset of if President Joe Biden was to approve forgiving student debt, it would basically be like, here's the money to cancel your student debts or whatever, or I'm just canceling debts. I forgive you. For what? I forgive you for the crime of trying to get an education so you can financially succeed in this backwards ass country that I currently, am the president of.
Yeah, like he's the Pope or something. I forgive you.
Yeah, that's basically what the policy all comes down to. The average the median American has $0 in outstanding student loan debt. I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure all those tens of thousands of people that attended Bernie Sanders rallies across the country, I don't think they would have been there if they weren't in student debt. I think this is I don't feel I need to bring up any specific statistics here because this is just a straight up lie. I mean,
Obama didn't pay off his student loans until he became president.
Let's bring Amira in here. How is it a lie, Amira?
So it's a lie.
Part. Let's get into the substance. Yeah.
It's a lie because according to Investopedia, an article I looked at earlier today, roughly 30% of all Americans who went to college took on some form of debt in order to do so. Borrowers between the ages of 25 and 34 had over $500 billion in federal student loan debt as of the fourth quarter of 2021. And adults ages 35 to 49 carried even more debt, with student loan balances totaling $622 billion. People who are 50 to 61 owe about $281 billion in student loan debt. So, Matt Iglesias, you are lying to the American people when you say that the median people do not have any student loan debt, because we don't have, let's see, what's the total? In 2020, the student loan debt in the trillions was 1.57 trillion. In 2020, it's gradually gone up in 2021, but not as much as it usually does. It usually goes up around 6%. That was one of something else I read earlier today. So he's talking bullshit, and this is just like what you said. This is a blue check gaslight to the American public, trying to act like he knows what he's talking about and just absolutely lying. He's full of shit.
It's also materialism, right? That they put more value on a car and car payments than on somebody's education. Because again, the rate for your paying back car payments is actually lower than would a lot of the student loans.
I'm paying 1.9% for
right. So a lot of this is capitalism, is materialism, and it's also by design.
It's like, I believe I'm gonna get the decimal wrong, but it's almost 5% interest, I believe, for federal student loans. It goes up and down each year, but yeah, it's so that just gives you 1.9, 5%. You do the math, right? But I think in addition to what Amira was saying, I mean, I think it's helpful to even look at this graph, right? Even from we were all alive in 2003, right? This is like, not that distant of a time, right? The Red Sox hadn't won the World Series yet, but they were going to the next year. And so 0.33 trillion to 1.75 trillion, right? And then I think here are some, additional statistics that, of course, Matt Iglesias forgets to mention, right? Student loan debt in the U.S. totals 1.749 trillion. In a regular year, the total debt grows 6 times faster than the nation's economy. But in 2021's fourth quarter, the total declined for the first time in history. The outstanding federal loan portfolio is over 1.611 trillion. 43.4 million borrowers have federal student loan debt. 43.4 million. The average federal loan student debt balance is $37,113, including private loan debt. The average balance may be as high as $40,904. The average public university student borrows $30,030 to attain a bachelor's degree. So there. So I don't really know what Matthew Iglesias was talking about there, because it wasn't even, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, but that wasn't even a misleading statistic or a cherry pick statistic. That was just blatantly wrong. We're seeing here on average, and so I guess if you include Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where he was getting it from. Does anybody have any ideas on where?
Maybe he has a different interpretation of what the word median means. I don't know.
I know where he got it from. He probably had to get like the most secure rubber glove and reach right up into the deepest crevices of his asshole to pull out that blatant.
Well, that is just a great image. Thank you, Ken. So yeah, that's how he did it.
Yeah.
So moving on. So let's talk about so now we're going to get into some direct action, because this weekend there was actually some direct action that happened. There has been talks of student debt strikes happening, right? So, but in addition to that, there were a group of people who gathered around outside the Secretary of Education building and protested all, basically saying end student loans. And so give me 1 second. I'm going to show, you may recognize this person. Their name is Afeni. And so give me 1 second as I try and pull this up. While I'm doing that, anyone feel free to say something.
Yeah. So back on the topic of student loans, you could borrow $30,000, and by the time you're almost done paying it, it'll be about 5 times the amount, maybe more. So yeah, it's a scam.
Yeah, because a lot of people define it as, well, these are just narrow-minded, conservative thinking people that are behind these policies. It's bipartisan, and as I said earlier, it's by design. They very much want to prevent a rebellion to really change things by keeping people in debt and pacifying the youth as a result. And even in some of the third world, they have this right where they don't have to go in debt to get into higher education, let alone the rest of the developed world. So this is just an ongoing issue.
And it's also connected to the fact that, in our society here in the United States, nothing is a guarantee. So like we don't have universal health care. We don't have good social services for people if they do, if they're struggling and they need some help up to, instead of that, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Other societies actually have some, guidelines in place to help people that need it. And so millennials are struggling with higher rent, low wages, a higher cost, especially now with inflation for goods and services. And then also having to take care of their health if they even can afford it. So it's a really bad slippery slope that we're on. And if we don't have any of these new social services programs that we need to implement in this country and also bolster with more money, we're not going to get anywhere.
And 15 an hour started, I believe, in 2003. So it's almost been, $15 minimum wage, it's almost been 20 years. So we definitely want to have that increased.
I don't think it's been that long. $15 an hour, I believe, started around 2015 or 2016. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it was more
the campaign or the
no, the actual price bump.
Price bump. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because there was things prior to that going on to advocate for it. But the point I'm making is it's been really long. It should be more like 18 or 20 an hour, especially if you look at inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go to Afeni now. And so this was one of many speeches that was given a couple of days ago outside the Secretary of Education's building.
The most student loan debt out of any demographic group. And we also support 80% of the Black households in America, solely or mainly. So when we're talking about cancellation of student loan debt, we're talking about radically thinking about what it looks like to put financial power back into Black people's hands. That generational tax that goes from mother to daughter, mother to son, we want that gone. So we're asking Joe Biden to pick up that pen, just like he picked up the pen and flicked it to sign the 90th on full crime bill, just like he picked that pen up and flicked it for the Hyde Amendment, just like he picked it up and flicked it to mass incarcerate all the Black and brown people in this fucking country. Then that means they can pick up the goddamn pen and fucking cancel the student loan debt. Black women hold the most.
Okay, so yeah, very great speech. I think so. I think it's important to add a little bit of context, even in terms of just policy, in terms of what Afeni is saying. So a lot of people fail to, and you'll never really hear this in the mainstream media, right? The Higher Education Act, originally signed in 1965, it's a law that grants a presidential administration by the educational secretary authority to enforce, pay, compromise, waive, or release government-held federal student loans, right? And then, this is 50% of U.S. adults support payments being pushed back, according to Newsweek. And so, but I think that the Higher Education Act of 1965 is important to talk about because although there is debate in terms of how to interpret that, and there is debate as to whether or not the Supreme Court, would even take, and who knows, with knowing our Supreme Court, it might be a challenge. But I think the whole point is that it hasn't even been tried, right?
Well, the press secretary, when they asked her about it, like, why doesn't Biden pass a student loan cancellation as he promised? She said, well, the Congress can give us a bill and we'll sign off on it. But that's just an excuse. I mean, he has the executive authority to do that. He promised at one point, besides canceling it, he said, okay, I'll try for 10,000. He hasn't tried for 1 cent. And you can't just put the blame on him. Also, the progressives that have made his promises, right, and in the House haven't tried to pass that as a bill either. So it's just very frustrating.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anyone else have anything else they would like to add to that before we go on?
Me.
Okay.
This whole thing where, like Ludin said, it's like you could borrow $30,000 and then you can end up paying, how much did you say?
About 5 times, if not more, what you started.
About 5 times, if not more, than what you goddamn borrowed. How does nobody not liken this to the practices of mafia loan sharks? This is how those guys operated and continue to operate today. And we'll make an argument for the people that they take advantage of by saying, oh, they're criminals, they're scumbags, they shouldn't be doing this to people and ruining their lives and stuff like that. And if you don't pay back their debts, obviously they kill you. But the big difference is that while they may kill you with guns, the government will just kill you by, making it so you basically live in poverty. They put you into so much debt that it's impossible to get out, and you're just consumed by the system. By allowing this to continue, by charging people for their God-given right of an education, and I say God-given right as if, God gives us anything nowadays, but by charging people for what should be a basic human right, getting an education, you're a piece of shit. And you're an even bigger piece of shit by putting in people for debt for this kind of thing. This is loan shark level of policy.
The mafia can't ruin your credit history.
Yes,
you're right. So in a way, it's worse.
Yeah, you're right. At least the mob doesn't.
At least the mafia leaves you alone if you leave them alone.
The government never leaves you
alone. So I think it's important that we show this tweet because this tweet is news. Right. Earlier today, there were reports that this was reportedly happening. Right. So to give additional context, I think originally student loans, we were supposed to get back to paying student loans in January. Then the Biden administration extended it to May as in terms of a moratorium with zero interest adding to our loans. And now it's looking like, according to the Vice President Harris, President and I understand that student loan debt adds stress for borrowers and their families. We're continuing the pause on federal student loan repayment through August 31, 2022. This pause will help 41 million people keep up with their monthly bills and meet their basic needs. And I really want to actually highlight this because so this is the Debt Collective, the nation's first debtors union, organizing to build power with debt as leverage. You are not alone. So definitely follow them, and I encourage you to go on their website. Honestly, for me, I mean, I knew that there was a student loan movement going on when it comes to a student loan strike, but this is I'm fairly new to actually specifically discovering the Debt Collective. Real quick, had anyone else known about the Debt Collective and can talk about maybe what they're doing?
Well, I've heard of them, but I just want to say this. I interpret that tweet from the vice president as, please vote for us in the midterms.
Okay, so that
Right.
goes
That's
off
really what
my
that's about.
question right there. Yeah. So you think that was literal that came from trying to get people to vote for them in the midterms? Is that what other people think? Do you think at all that this rally that happened on Sunday outside had anything to do with it, or do you think it just happened to be a coincidence because, hey, the midterms are coming up?
I have been noticing that there have been a lot of politicians who were progressive when they first started, have not said anything about Medicare for all, canceling student loan debt, what have you. Anything that they ran on, they kind of like put a pause on it for the past couple of years. And all of a sudden, once midterms roll around, oh, Medicare for all, we need it. Oh, cancel student loan debt. Oh, the climate crisis. No. They don't work like that.
Movement building is more important than electoralism at this point.
Yeah. Amira, do you think that that Harris announcing this had to do more with the midterms? Or I guess my question is, if this rally hadn't happened, do you think that they would have pushed it back anyway because of the midterms, or do you think this kind of lit a little bit of a fire underneath them?
Yeah, so sadly, I don't think that the protest got, of course, it doesn't get as much coverage as it should in mainstream media. And then of course, progressives like the squad, like Ludin was saying, like all these people that talk about these kinds of policies when they're trying to get elected. This is the whole reason why we have these different coalitions that are coming up and why people are feeling so empowered to speak their truth, because they thought that they had this progressive wing within the Democrats that were going to support them for these kinds of movements and moments in time. I don't think that them saying that they're going to extend student loan debt, though, is because of this specifically. I really do think that it has to do with the fact that there has been a serious trend of shift from independents and also even people on the left, like Democrat leaning individuals, that are shifting over to the Republican Party. And the Republican Party, while some are going to get mad at me for saying this, like there is a big conglomerate that is very far right, but there's also a semi-conservative but kind of progressive wing as well, that they kind of want more of like the traditional family values, but they also look at things that are social programs and stuff that they want to also see. And student loan debt is one of the biggest hindrances to the Democratic Party at this point, because that was something that Biden did run on. I have a couple of friends that are regretting their vote for Biden now that he's completely failed to carry out that promise of removing some, if not all, of that debt, because they were like, well, I guess I voted wrong. And I'm like, this is why we need to pay attention to the performative tactics that so many of these politicians are doing, because this is what they do. Democrats are going to get completely obliterated in the midterms, and they're going to try to say that that's because of far right-wing politicians and because of Trump and because of Russia and all of this stuff, but they're failing at their message, and it's becoming quite clear. And I also just want to say that, pushing the time frame for paying back these student loans isn't going to help at all, because we have so many other systemic issues that are occurring right now for people that do have student loan debt. They're not going to be able to pay it when that time does come, because they're not able to save anything right now in this moment because of inflation and low wages and everything that's going on right now.
I think it should also be considered there's a lot of Americans who will not vote, who are fed up with the system, and also, of course, will vote third party.
Mm-hmm.
Americans that otherwise would have voted Democrat had they not betrayed the working class once again. Big surprise.
Well, and I wish I still had this graph, because I was looking at this graph earlier and I don't know where it is. You know how sometimes you see something and you forget to save it and then it goes. You think it'll stay, but it doesn't. Huh? So it was an interesting graph that it really showed how much it's pulled people and said, are you more likely to vote for Democrats in the midterms if they extend the student loan moratorium? And a very significant number of people, particularly young people, voted yes, that if they don't, they probably will not vote. But if they do, they would. Right. And so I think that speaks volumes. And, you know, it's even Biden's level of denialism, right? It's staring at him in the face how much young people disapprove of him, right? Like his approval ratings are low anyway, but then you look at people who are like 30 and below, 35 and below, and he's like in the high 20s, low 30s approval rating, right?
Mhm.
And so he knows that he can't keep ignoring them completely, right? And so I do think part of it is that as well. You know, doing whatever they can to just barely appease, to keep us somewhat docile, right? They don't want us to rebel in the streets, right? And so they'll do something to at least keep us at bay.
Also, he can barely put a sentence together,
Of
so what he
course.
knows is limited. You're talking about his advisors, his people around him, I guess.
Sure. The administration and advisors. And so, yeah, but I wanted to just show a clip real quick of, you know, this single mom who's talking about her loan debt as well. And this was during the event, because I think this really, you know, I think really kind of paints a picture, and a good way to sort of wrap up this topic before we talk about how wonderful Amazon is. Okay, thank you very much, ads. Let's talk about that too. No, I'm just-
Damn you, ads.
all right, adding this right now.
I am out here because I'm $89,000 worth of student debt, and it is unjust. You know, it's sad, but it is. But Joe needs to pick up the pen and he needs to cancel the debt, because this is ruining my generation. It's going to ruin future generations. I have a 17-year-old son, and I can't send him to college now. He'll be a senior next year, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do, what he's going to do. He's trying to figure out what he wants to do, and he wants to go to college to be an engineer, and he can't because, I mean, I can't help him. I'm a single mom. I can't help him go to school. So, you know, it's ruining futures. Now we're going to have like generation and generation stacked with student debt, and it's insane. It's unright. It's unjust. It's not okay. We should not be in this position. For one of, you know, the best countries in the world, supposedly, then why are we struggling this hard? Why is this a thing? It should not be. I am out.
Yeah. So, you know, that's real. And I think really it's very consistent with what we've talked about versus our anecdotal experiences. And also it supports sort of the data of what
Americans that want to
heard as
study
well.
medicine, for example, have gone to
Yes.
Cuba and not had to pay out of pocket. But isn't that a shame that they have to go to a country that's been under our sanctions for 60 years? That's a third world country in order to have rights that we don't have here at home.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Ludin, you said it hit you hard. So I'll let you get the last word on anything else you want to say as we transition to Amazon.
Yeah. Because that kid was me, basically. My mom was working 2 jobs back when then, and even then she still couldn't put me through school. So I empathize with that, and hopefully in the near future we can get student loans removed.
Yeah, absolutely. One of these days. All right. So moving on to Amazon. So this is one of those things where, you know, you see these headlines and you're just like, wait, is this satire? And then you actually read it and you're like, no, it's not satire. And no, the headline is not at all exaggerating. This is in fact what is happening, right? So as many of you are all watching are probably aware, right? Amazon, the Staten Island site in Amazon, we actually talked about this last week on our show. Staten Island Amazon became the first site to unionize. Obviously, so many organizers played a role in this. Chris Smalls, who unjustly over a year ago now got fired from Amazon, really played a pivotal role in making sure that Amazon got unionized. And I think one of the things that's really amazing about this is that this is also a brand new union. It's called the ALU. So they didn't even use a union that's been around for a long time, right? They did it completely grassroots and they created their own structures. And of course, there still is a lot of fight left in this. Amazon, of course, is not going to roll over and say, sure, right? I've heard that they're probably going to try and challenge it in court. I think Amazon, there were the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I was actually reading the U.S. Chamber of Commerce said that they co-opted people into voting for unions, which I find hilarious because if you actually look back to even Bessemer and beyond, Amazon, they are completely projecting. Amazon has done that so many times in terms of being dirty in order to intimidate people into not voting for a union. But I just want to kind of just give you a little bit. So one of the things that Amazon is now doing, I guess, to fight back against more people organizing is limiting words you can use in your worker chat app, including union, restrooms, pay raise, and plantation. And so Amazon will block and flag employee posts on a planned internal messaging app that contains keywords pertaining to labor unions, according to internal company documents reviewed by The Intercept. An automatic word monitor would also block a variety of terms that could represent potential critiques of Amazon's worker conditions like slave labor, prison, plantation, as well as restrooms, presumably related to reports of Amazon employees relieving themselves in bottles to meet punishing quotas. I remember that. Our teams are always thinking about new ways to help employees engage with each other, says Amazon spokesperson Barbara M. Great. This particular program has not been approved yet and may change significantly or never launch at all. In November 2021, Amazon convened a high-level meeting in which top executives discussed plans to create an internal social media program that would let employees recognize coworkers' performance with posts called shoutouts, according to a source with direct knowledge. And so, we get the point that they are going to, and I think it's, I want to just show the whole list of different ones because this is really ridiculous so a pilot program is slated to launch later this month. With this program, in addition to slurs and swear words, the plan list includes the following words: I hate, union, fire, terminated, compensation, pay raise, bullying, harassment, I don't care, rude, this is concerning, stupid, this is dumb, prison, threat, petition, grievance, injustice, diversity, ethics, fairness, accessibility, vaccine, senior ops, living wage, representation, unfair, favoritism, rate, tot, unite, unity, plantation, slave labor, master, concern, freedom, restaurants, robots, trash, committee, coalition. So yeah.
Should the consumers not get rid of 24-hour package deliveries from Amazon to take away those quotas? Like if the consumers, demand that they stop doing that out of solidarity with the workers, that might help as well. But something I talked about on Comrade K's show the other day, corporations are not democracies, right? They're full-blown dictatorships, and how they're censoring is shocking and unconstitutional. But, there's the legality of it too, right? They determined that corporations are people or have more rights than people now. And it's just capitalism out of control as far as I see it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I'm just looking at some of these words, like let's just take away the whole issue. Like, yes, they don't want them to say words that have anything to do with like working rights and labor right. That's a given. But like fire, I'm just thinking of like the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire that happened in like 1911 or 12 in New York, where they couldn't get out and all these workers died. Right? Like, if there's a fire, how are you going to let anybody? Which is very possible. There's a lot of stuff going on in these Amazon facilities. There could be a fire. How is anybody going to know that there's a fire? Like, that's
If it was past tense, like I was fired, that might make some sense. And if they want to prevent a worker complaining about being fired, that's still on the app. But
how these
this is literally a
fire
hazard in the job. Like, so you're going to keep working and die? Like,
yeah. Amira, you look a little concerned. You got anything else to say?
I have so many things going on in my head right now.
I'm not trying to say you shouldn't look concerned over this.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I know my face always gives me away because I'm looking at this from like an HR perspective, because I used to work for like a year and a half in HR. And, it's one of those things where I'm like, what is the goal here of trying to quell this kind of speech amongst your workers on an app that they're using that's likely a required app that they have to have on their required phones because they work for freaking Amazon. So that's just kind of where my brain went. I was just like, as someone who's worked in human resources, and I know the dynamic is extremely difficult between the employer and the employee, and trying to make sure that you have that balance. And one of the things that always frustrated me in HR is that it's not what you think it is. It's never really about trying to help the workers retain a better relationship with the employer. It's really about finding the loopholes that the employer wants to have in order to terminate someone without cause, to not raise wages, even though it's very evident that the entire warehouse and like all of the workers on the line need to have that wage increase because all of the prices are going up. And so by having this kind of censoring of speech, which this very much is, it goes hand in hand with a lot of what we've talked about here on the New Left on these panels, which is that the minute that you start to allow someone to get deplatformed and to be canceled and to be removed, this is what ultimately happens. And this has been the concern of very, very many people. They just don't get on mainstream media to talk about this, is that, like I mentioned this yesterday with our Lee Camp interview, that starting with Trump, at least from where I sit, that was really the most visual depiction of we are deplatforming a sitting president from a platform that is from a private company. And that set a really bad precedent for First Amendment free speech. And so many people are going to come out and say, Amazon's a private company. They can do whatever they want. They are one of the largest employers here in the United States. They have, I think it's over like almost like 200,000 employees now that come from the United States alone. And Alex made a good point about, if we were to say no more 24-hour delivery, let's give these people a real good wage. Let's give them protections. I feel like that should be the bare minimum. I can't believe that something like that is even legal. And I really feel for these workers. And yeah.
And, I definitely I definitely agree. I mean, I think, Alex, you bring up a great point. And realizing how powerful Amazon is in terms that it just has bought so many things, right? They own Whole Foods. They own so many things you don't even know of, right? Mm-hmm. And so Amazon has made itself so powerful to the point where it's almost impossible to successfully boycott them. We might be able to cut off a little bit of their profit. And I mean, let's be real. The Staten Island workers, I mean, if you've been looking at their stocks, Amazon stocks have been popping up on my computer, and it's been going down like every day, right? So let's give credit where credit is due. You can make a dent, and Amazon still is filthy rich because and by we, I mean society has just turned a blind eye when it comes to the antitrust laws that have just completely, been obliterated and have allowed these corporations to become the most powerful entities we have.
Everybody here remembers 2010, the BP oil spill off the Gulf of Mexico.
Yes.
So imagine if an individual did that had no association with BP, just a guy who went and trespassed on BP land and did something stupid and caused the whole oil spill. What would happen to him? He probably would have went life in prison. But because corporations have more rights than people now, they get away with things like that, and they actually benefited from it. Obama made sure that BP had a monopoly in the Gulf after that. So you're actually encouraged to be negligent and do insane things like that. That's how out of control the corporations are. And I've said it before, we're not in a democracy now. We're in a corporatocracy, if you consider the laws and how they're protected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like Austin's comment here in the chat. And I'm trying to look this up now. Feel free, Austin, or anyone else to look this up. I'm pretty sure the Chamber of Commerce is like the most powerful lobbyist ever in the country, right? So it would make sense that the Chamber of Commerce is on Amazon's side, right? They are all part of the same team. And so
they already blamed that on Russia, by the way. They said Russia invented this Amazon union.
The Chamber of Commerce said that Russia invented it?
No, I didn't know if it was Chamber of Commerce, but it came out. I think it was the press secretary, the one who's going to go with MSNBC now. But it came out and said that this Amazon union has to be connected to Russia.
Psaki said that.
I think it was her, but I did see it was reported on that it was coming out that they were blaming this on Russian interference.
If you have that, let's pull that up because I think
I'll Google it. And I'm not saying I remember it was the press secretary, but I remember
no, but anyone. I mean, that
it came out and it was official from the I don't think it was New York Times or something. It was official. They were quoting for somebody that said they thought there was Russian interference on this Amazon thing. So I'll look it up now.
Yeah, so looking it up, and while you're looking it up, Kay, what's up? What do you got to say?
Okay, before I say what I want to say, has everyone made their take yet? Because I want to go off on Amazon for a little bit, and I'm screaming.
Sure, Alex is looking something up, so go off.
Okay, all right, okay, all right, fuck it. I'm going full red mode for this. This is borderline feudalism. This is absolutely horrifying. I'm going to go ahead and paint a horrible picture for the average American person here to maybe sell them on the idea of unions if Americans weren't already sold enough by the good results that they've been producing lately. Okay, you wake up, you go to work in the morning, 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, whatever the fuck, whatever, how long your job requires you to work. And in the case of big corporations like Amazon, you go in, you can't say shit about management, you can't say anything about any health code violations or workplace violations that may occur, you can't talk about your wages, you can't talk shit about the boss, you can't suggest that anything be done better, you have zero say. And in an age, in this new technological age we're living in, when lists of banned words like this are being produced, this is comically dystopian. And for some reason, the mainstream media, well, I know the reason. For some reason, this stuff is not being talked about in every single household by the boomers who were shouting at us socialists for being like, oh, you guys want 1984, when this is the most ink-sock shit I have ever seen in my life. These same corporations that rule your life like a dictatorship, when you go in, you can't even criticize them off the job and try to unionize, because God forbid you say anything bad about them on social media or even start talking to them, they'll catch wind of it, they'll fire you, you'll be out on your ass. And what's even worse, when Americans try to go to the polls to try to vote and change their situation and exercise their rights and freedoms that they supposedly have to better their lives, well, guess what, fuckos? All those corporations that you slave away for also own the politicians that you are voting in. And they also do the same thing overseas, keeping the global south exploitable for the capitalist class. This is so horrific. There's only one kind of solution for this kind of shit. Seize the means of production. It's the only way we're going to get out of this. Amazon's just going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing with those profits. If you live in a country where you share soil with an Amazon plant, you do not live in a democracy. None of us live in any sort of democracy. It is only through workers' control will we actually be able to ethically have a place where we can express ethics, have a place where we can democratically decide our wages, what to invest in, how to invest it, what people's concerns are, who to hire, who to fire, whatever. It is only through the collective power of the workers can we create a world where this kind of neo-feudalism under late-stage capitalism won't continue to just wreak havoc. Seize the means of production. Fuck Jeff Bezos. I need some water.
Yeah. So thanks, Alex, for finding it and bringing it up. And I think just one final thought: if we're gonna other Amazon workers, that's a huge mistake, because Amazon is like, I think the number 2 or number 1 employer. I'm not exactly sure. Them and Walmart go back and forth, but think of them as a model for how they treat workers. And so how they're treating workers might eventually come to where you work as well. So this is why I think we all should be in this. Alex, what did you find?
So I found a tweet about this. This is where it's stemming from. They claim that one time Christian Smalls had shared an RT story, and that this somehow proves that this whole movement to get the Amazon union together is affiliated with the Russian state.
Yeah, and that was, I think, at least one Twitter account that I saw spreading that information was Matthew Iglesias. And part of that, I think, had to do with also the fact that there were some people who got angry that he expressed his disappointment with AOC for not showing up.
Where's he from? Is Iglesias like a Venezuelan exile or something?
Sorry, that wasn't Iglesias. That was Matthew Dimitri. Different account.
Yeah, because we were talking about Iglesias earlier, and I'm thinking to myself,
I mixed up.
I'm thinking to myself, how this guy blatantly lies. He reminds me of some certain exiles I've had encounters with.
Yeah. So, and that's, I think, what we're seeing too, and which is really, I think, harmful for the left movement, is that some people are starting to be on Team AOC and being like, don't criticize her, right? And
they worship her so much they're going to demonize
right? And
Chris Smalls because he shared an RT story once. So what?
Right. It's like, this person has done more for people's lives than you've ever done, in your whole entire life. He did in like a year. So it really is it is frustrating. I mean,
he's really the best type of hero you could imagine if you're a leftist. He's a working class hero. Yes. He's a person of color. He stood up and he did it without the help of politicians. It's beautiful what he did. Absolutely. Not just him, the workers with him, but through his leadership. And when he got fired, he turned it to an advantage. He didn't let himself give up, and he kept fighting. So I'm really proud of what he did.
Absolutely. Me too. So I want to show an interesting Amazon graph, right? So this is musculoskeletal injuries per 10,000 full-time employees, right? So we've got Amazon warehouses in the blue, non-Amazon warehouses in the orange, and all private businesses, right? And so at least it went down a little bit from 2017 to 19, right? But like, are you kidding me? And so this is part of what has led them to need to unionize. There's absolutely no safety. And now, and this, I think, it goes so much with the fact that why it really stuck out to me that they banned the word fire, right? Because again, I don't think this technology would know the context in which you're saying fire, right? If there's a fire in the warehouse and you say fire, it's probably going to reject it, right? So, anyone else got any takes? I know, Regina, we do. I wish it would show that, and I'm sure it doesn't look pretty at all.
I didn't see Regina's comment and went away real quick. What did she say? She
just said, we need to see this graph for 2020 to 2022. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, to compare. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. But the reason why I showed it is because I think it paints a perfect picture anyway of just, I think the biggest thing to take away from it is that Amazon has not reformed itself at all these last few years with regards to that. And it really paints a good picture of how much higher injury rates are to everywhere else. So, anyone else have anything else to say to that?
Well, I just wanted to make a brief comment about how they blame things on foreign powers to compare it to other things that happened recently, unless somebody else has something to say right now.
Go ahead.
So I remember when I was tear gas with BLM in 2020, soon after moving here to Jacksonville. I got interviewed on RT, but before I even got interviewed on RT talking about it, because the local media, of course, interviewed me and censored it. They didn't want to put it out there. They were already saying that Maduro, and I think some people even said Putin, but they were saying Maduro was behind these Black Lives Matter protests going on throughout the United States. And they made similar claims in Colombia against the fascist regime there, that Maduro was behind all of that. But now they were saying, that Maduro had all this influence from Venezuela to be behind these. And this is what they do to discredit, legitimate working class movements. They blame it on foreign leaders. So I'm not surprised that they went back and found something that Chris Smalls tweeted. And a lot of intelligent activists had looked at RT and they're upset over the censorship, right? I mean, you guys interviewed Lee. I interviewed him recently. You have Americans that most of what they talked about wasn't foreign policy and what Russia was doing. It was about activism and things here at home, and they were given a voice through outlets like that. So to try to discredit the movement or the union as a result is despicable, but it's nothing new either.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we as more and more places get unionized, I think we really need to look out for sort of that red baiting, Russia baiting, and really look out for the sneaky laws that they're trying to pass, right? What's going to be the next Citizens United? What's going to be the next right to work? Because if you think, our government officials, particularly that are bought off of Amazon, are bought off by the U.S. Commerce, right, are going to just kind of not do anything about this, it'd be wrong. So I think we all, especially us in the indie media spaces, really should be keeping our eye outs and really sounding the alarms if we notice anything strange going on.
You know what right to work means in states like here in Florida? What it means right not to work. You can be fired at will, even over sexual harassment. So it's really Orwellian, right? They call it something that sounds positive, but it does the opposite.
And I think they've always been great at coming up with great phrases. School choice, right?
No child left behind, but at least find all the kids,
Yeah. Like on face value, you'd be like, oh, of course I don't want children left behind. Right. Of course, school choice is great. Right. Of course, right to work. I like, working is good. And
don't forget net neutrality.
Net neutrality. Yes, that's another one.
And they go after unions' right to work too, right? Because then you don't have to pay dues and that weakens them economically. So there's always an ulterior motive behind these legislations, and also the timing. For example, here in Florida recently, they passed an anti-solar powered bipartisan bill here in the Sunshine State, limiting how much people can use solar power. And right at that same time, they did the Don't Say Gay bill. So it was kind of a distraction. Of course, I'm against both. And also a lot of people these are people claiming to be on the left that are defending the Don't Say Gay bill. What they're ignoring was what it actually says in the law. It says, or any age deemed inappropriate. So, don't want to get too much in a tangent, but by those words, or any age don't deem appropriate, that means any state college, if they think, well, most of our students are 20 somethings, they shouldn't hear about homosexuality either. Legally, they could ban the use of that as well. Just like how they went after critical race theory. I mean, these are just ongoing laws, sneaky, as Andrew said, that they're doing and framing a different way. Or, the corporate media is only focusing on one aspect of it and not looking at the timing and the other bills that are omitting the dimension of the other bills that are being passed as well.
Yeah. Austin, I'm really intrigued when you said we need worker co-ops, only one in Alabama. I wonder if at some point we could maybe get that one worker co-op on this show and just talk about it. That would be interesting.
I'm sure there's other co-ops in other parts of the country. I think he means the only one
absolutely.
The only one in the South in Alabama, though?
Only one in. Well, that's what I'm saying. It still would be interesting to hear in a place where it is not worker co-op friendly, like how they do it, how they go about it. That I'm very intrigued by that. Kay, if you could just kind of wrap it up and everything real quick, and then we'll go on to just the coal, talking about this coal direct action, which I think is really good. So I'm going to transition.
I'll keep it very quick. One of the added benefits that I forgot to leave out in my gigantic exhale of anger that I had about Amazon was that one of the benefits of whatever you want to call it, workers' co-op, worker-controlled industry, whatever you want to call it, one of the benefits from that is that rather than having a greedy ass CEO like Jeff Bezos, who was financially incentivized by his mountain of cash to corrupt all systems of government and upend checks and balances by buying out and lobbying politicians instead of spending that money on, his workers, doing anything except spending that money back, put his money back into that business to make it better for his workers. One of the benefits of having it being controlled by the collective workers is that average Joes who work for these companies aren't incentivized to make greedy decisions like taking the company overseas and taking jobs away from America, or hoarding money in offshore accounts, or investing in worthless assets like yachts, or lobbying politicians. So the more and more places unionize, the more and more wealth is controlled by the workers, the less corrupt we can actually move the American government, or in some way limit how much power the corrupt government can have in the lives of workers. The workers need to create their own destiny, if I may be a little, generic in my speech there. Sorry.
So real quick, Regina brings up a really good question. What is worker co-op? I have research to do. Anybody here able to take a stab at a good, concise definition for Regina?
I could give a concise definition. I think with Regina's quote up there, she can't see me speaking, but
Now she can.
okay. So Comrade K mentioned earlier workers' control, and he was referring to workers' control of the means of production. It actually is very close to that, where the workers, I'm trying to think of the economic term, they're shareholders. So the workers are all shareholders of the business, and they run it themselves. And a dramatic case you could look up in Spain, they took over a major company called Mondragon. And I think it's spelled M-O-N and then like dragon, Mondragon, all one word. And so the Mondragon company was successful in Spain, and it was run by a workers' co-op. But usually you only see co-ops in this country, in progressive parts of the country, in smaller mid-sized businesses. But anybody else can elaborate more on that.
Well, in a workers' co-op, usually you can elect certain representatives, or, democratically vote on wages and hours and stuff.
I like what's, owned and managed by the workers, I think is a great, 5-word answer to of it. I think, and then there's different variations, but that's sort of the gist of it. So cool. So as we know, Joe Manchin is very much a bought off senator, right? And I think a lot of liberals like to kind of use Joe Manchin as the excuse, right? It's not just Democrats, it's just Joe Manchin that's blocking everything, right? It's not just cinema, it's not, right? At the same time, I think I definitely support whenever somebody is going to hold any politician accountable for their corruption, right? Because then that hopefully trickles down to other politicians, and they're like, okay, maybe they're coming for me next. Maybe I need to clean up my act, right? So this right here is they are the Coal Baron Blockade, and they actually have an event coming up on April 9th in West Virginia. Resist the Manchin coal machine. So they say on April 9th, we will engage in a mass nonviolent direct action at the power plant that burns all of Senator Joe Manchin's fossil fuel, where he earns $500,000 per year while killing climate legislation. Through a large-scale act of civil disobedience that breaks through the noise and the social media clutter, we can not just move one specific player, but shake the ground on which the game is played. We can help elevate climate change to the center of the domestic agenda and make this crisis impossible for the White House and Congress to ignore. To Senator Manchin, we are publicly sharing our plans today. We will mobilize for a large, nonviolent direct action against your coal company, where you wage violence against our bodies and our lands and our future in order to enrich ourselves. So here is, I'm actually, let me put the link in the chat so that anybody can look further into it, sign their name, right? In case anybody here watching lives in West Virginia or is close to West Virginia, this could be something worth considering to get involved with, or at least get more information on.
Yeah, while you're getting that link, I wanted to give a brief anecdote. Once there was a Democrat, I think it was a couple months ago, running for office, and they left a tweet about how we need to get rid of all the Republicans. And this is right around the time that Cinnamon Mansion were blocking things. And I said, this is not really smart, especially if, you win the primary and you want independent support. Why just blame everything on the Republicans? And his response was very elitist. He was like, well, I have a bachelor's degree in political science. I think I know best, or something like that. And I was like, look, you don't have to have a degree in politics to know that with people like Manchin and Sinema doing what they're doing, it's not very convincing just blaming it all on the Republicans. But it was mentioned earlier that the Democrats are probably going to lose big in the midterms. And it's true. They're not learning from their mistakes. And how they're phrasing themselves in their campaigns, even when they're claiming to be progressives, it's just backfiring.
Yeah. So you have a bachelor's in political science. That's almost kind of saying like, I have a bachelor's in economics. Okay, great. So you read all of like Friedman and Hayek. Whoop-de-doo. Like, like what funds these programs. That's a whole other story. But I want to hear a little bit from, takes from a few of you, particularly, we talk about direct action all the time. And I think it's important we bring up specific examples of direct action because that helps inform potentially other direct action things to occur, right? So let me just start with Amira. And do you think this is an effective form of direct action? And would you have any suggestions or any ways, any things that maybe any potential shortcomings to this?
I think this is really great. I think this is one of the best ways to do, nonviolent direct action and really speaking to the moment and going directly to the individual here in this case, Manchin, who Democrats love to use as the scapegoat for why they can't do anything. And I think it's going to be really telling when we look at moments like this and events that happen where politicians are and where they're going to stand or not stand with these individuals. And it's very similar to what, AOC failed to do with the Amazon workers for Staten Island. So I do think that, this is exactly what needs to happen. The more that we build these kinds of coalitions, I think from there, the coalitions can then, merge even more and kind of find that camaraderie between each other. Because one of, I think, the most difficult things right now is we want to see progress happen immediately like that. And it's going to take some time, and it's going to take a real collective labor movement of individuals that come together. And it's also, I think, going to have to take us away from all of this party politics and political divisions, because it really it doesn't make sense to have that kind of division any longer, because there's real issues that we need to see to. So this is something I definitely support. I want to see more of, and I'm going to do my research as well to see what other movements are coming up just like this.
Absolutely. And I would be really looking forward to seeing how the turnout is and how it goes, particularly on April 9th. It's only a few days away.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, for sure. Ludin, I want to get you in on this because I think it's been a little while. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I am all for direct action. Because I have been part of, would you consider the March for Medicare for All direct action or just activism?
I think it's direct action. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, civil disobedience is not always direct action, but direct action includes marches and activism.
Yeah.
So yeah, as long as the message gets through and nobody starts anything that will force the government's hand in activating the police or anything like that, then by all means go for it. That's usually my mode of operation.
I think one of the things that really stands out to me that I think is a real positive with this direct action is the sophistication in it. And what I mean is that it's clearly based on research of these are people who specifically enrich Joe Manchin, right? So we're going to go after the source, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to go after people. It's good in that sense to make an example out of that. However, the people are really just the ones that are attached to the strings, right? If you can go after the people who are attaching the strings, who are meant to kind of be in the shadows and realize, hey, we see you and this is what we're going to do, right? Like imagine finding Charles Koch's house and just like protesting right outside there, right? Like that. It's not quite that level, but it is sort of along the lines of realizing like you're the ones who really are the causing a lot of this, and you're going to hear it from us. So that's something I think is really kind of cool about this. Yeah.
Before we head out, I wanted to say a couple things real quick. First off, it's really it's really what's the term? Like a fresh air, like breathing
breath of fresh
air. Yeah, breath of fresh air. Thank you. It's getting late. Talking with you guys, especially here in Florida, there's a lot of people that I try to talk to them about these issues, and we're in a time where a lot of people are indoctrinated, and I don't agree with everything that George Orwell was about, but one of my favorite quotes from him is, "In a time of universal deceit, speaking the truth is a revolutionary act." Right? Speaking the truth to people shouldn't have to be controversial or revolutionary. But when you have masses that are so indoctrinated, it gets depressing. But then you have victories like the Amazon Union that really brings me a lot of hope. And I hope that we can continue to fight to cancel student debt. That would help the economy tremendously. That would be revolutionary. And also people want to see the show that I do. I do it every Tuesday. I'm a co-host with Eclectic Radical, and we are from 9:30 Eastern to 11 about. And so, yeah, our show will be next week. But we recently interviewed Lee Camp, like you guys have. He's a great journalist. I've known him for a long time.
He's making the rounds.
Yep. So it's great to be on this panel for the first time with you guys.
Absolutely. No, thank you for coming on. And I think this is a good segue because how we usually end these panels is, people kind of say where they are, where they can find them, and different things that they have coming up. So let's start with Ludin, and then we'll make our way to the right, then to Alex and to Amira.
Very well then. You can find me on Twitter at Ludin Chazo. You can also find me on Professional Assets every so often. We are planning a show to be released sometime soon. I'm not entirely sure when, but when we do, it will be about oil. Lots of oil.
Like oil and vinegar? Like
there was the murky black stuff that
petroleum.
Those people. Yeah.
Keep an eye out for that. And so on to the next person.
Cool. Comrade K, you're up.
Hello. Okay, you guys finish with your stuff first because I
Alex, anything else you wanted to add there?
Well, one of the things we're going to talk about next week, and we like to go off on tangents, we're eclectic, is lithium. We're going to talk about lithium because, Elon Musk backed the coup in Bolivia, the fascist coup a couple of years ago, to try to extract lithium from there. But what a lot of people are not talking about when they talk about Ukraine is that most of the lithium in Ukraine are in the eastern provinces and the very areas that are being disputed. And I wouldn't be surprised if Elon Musk was financing Zelensky over that. But yeah, we're going to talk about lithium and how electronic cars are not the solution. We need to have solar power cars. Of course, we need to get off oil. But it's like saying, fracking's so much better than coal. No, they're both wrong. We need to look at alternatives. So yeah, that'll definitely be one of the things we'll talk about.
Yeah. And Amira, go for it.
So I am a writer and also a speaker here at PVN. I write for my blog called Endemic Times, which you can find at endemictimes.com. I also have my own YouTube channel, which is Endemic Times as well. I'm also on Twitter, and I do almost every month a panel here at PVN. I'm probably going to be doing a little bit more. And I'm really glad that I was able to speak with you guys about this today. One project I am working on for my own YouTube at Endemic Times is Afghanistan's poppy production and opium, and looking into that. That's been recently dealing with the Taliban, making it illegal for them to produce the opium. So I'm going to be covering that over the next couple of days, and hopefully I'll have that by the weekend, if not by next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quick suggestion, you should look up, I'll actually DM it to you, Amira, later, but for anybody listening, there's a really great video that came out with Christian Parenti, who's an economist. He's the son of the historian Michael Parenti, where he talks about the poppy trade in Afghanistan. That's a fascinating video. I'll make sure to send that to you.
Yeah,
And
please
also,
do.
just lastly, I forgot to mention, Elon Musk is starting to take over Twitter. That's concerning. We're going to be talking about that next week.
Ooh, very good topic. Yeah, yeah. And Comrade K, you ready?
Yeah. Sorry about that. So you can follow me on Twitter and TikTok by that name and handle. Just look for me. You'll find me. I have a show that I do every single Saturday at 6 o'clock. However, unfortunately, just like last week, I probably won't be able to do it this week as well because I'm moving into my place and it's getting very difficult. However, I'm going to be posting more content that I produce on my own onto the People's Voice Network to compensate for that a little bit more this week. So that's what you can expect from me. And my final point before we go tonight involving this show, seize the means of production. I'm getting really tired of this shit.
Yeah. And so for me, you can catch me Mondays at 9:30 p.m. on Postmortem Breakdown on Joy's show. And then, of course, you can catch me here on panels and additional shows on the People's Voice Network. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. We are a very, very young channel derived from the Populist Voice Network. But we are very happy with, in the little amount of time, how many subscribers and viewers we've been able to get. So let's keep that momentum going so that we can continue to reach our voices out to the people. We also have like another channel that's like a right-wing one that has a similar name to us that we're trying to like surpass their subs in. So, that'd be great. I think they're like at a 130 and they haven't moved an inch. So, just low key, that'd be great if we could surpass them. It's always great to block out right-wing voices because of course they have all the money and power behind them. So, if we can do it with nothing, hey, your ideas must really suck. And so, but thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your night. Take care.
Thanks so much.